Hi, everybody, and welcome back. I am here today with Sarah Kernion, who is the founder of Inchstones. And Inchstones is an absolutely incredible platform where you can find Substack content, interview content on all things autism. And Sarah brings a really unique and special perspective as a mom of three, two of whom have profound autism. So she has joined us here today to talk about her experience, her story, and all about her Inchstones project. Welcome today, Sarah. We're excited to have you.
Chloe, I'm so honored to be here. That was such a kind introduction. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to get to talk with you today. So, we'll just jump right in. For those who may not be aware, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your family's journey with autism?
Of course. Well, I'm Sarah. I'm the founder of Inchstones, which pulls from the word milestones, right? So I replaced mile with inch because when you have children with any diagnosis that's life altering, you learn to find celebration and presence and wins in the smallest of moments. So I call those Inchstones, which became really the word that has led my entire mission in life as a mother of children with profound autism. Um, our life is full. It is beautiful. It's exhausting, and it's, often invisible to the outside neurotypical world out there. Our journey has been long. Millie is now almost 11, and Mac is 8. I have a typical 13-year-old daughter, Morgan, as well. I always say that autism was really just a great disorientation because when you are handed and told that your child has a diagnosis or disorder, you're sitting in evaluations, wondering and how you wish you could know more, and you realize that people aren't saying things out loud. I mean, realizing very quickly that those systems meant to support us weren't really built for children like mine. And the whole process by which to grow an understanding of your child with a profound disability makes you realize that if you don't learn the system, legally, strategically, your child will sort of fall through it because there's such great misunderstanding about profound non-speaking autism. And so Inchstones really came from that place. I always say I'm not here to showcase my life and to say, look at me with two children with non-speaking autism and look what we do. I use it as a place to be a mirror for what is possible, not inspiration in any pretty packaged sense, but a necessity. I saw a massive gap between what parents were experiencing and what was being said publicly about autism. There's a lot of different emotive patterns on acceptance, but not tools for actual survival. And, we're told to trust this system. You get into early intervention, you go through the process of all these evaluations and observations, and you think that it's all just going to happen and it's going to provide access, inclusion, and growth for your child. And as a parent, you step back and go, yeah, in theory, that's what they're attempting to do, but in reality, it's not what really happens. And so I realized very quickly that the more I sort of showcased how to maneuver, how to take ownership, and how to really sit in radical acceptance of your children for who they are, it becomes the most freeing thing for you as a parent. And I always say profound autism was the last thing on my bingo card.
I've so enjoyed kind of getting to click through your website and learn about your story some because it sounds like you are really trying to be a motivator for those parents out there that have kind of just reached the point of discouragement where life is misery and that's all there is going to be because that is the narrative they're presented with a lot of times. So
Yeah.
the fact that you're willing to stand out and be like, no, it's possible to live a beautiful life even in spite of or even because of autism is super unique, I think, to
Well, I
the
think
sphere of
that
advocacy.
it made me realize, just like any label, right? Any
Mhm.
identity, that being an autism mom, right? Like people think, oh gosh, she must just be wiped, or how does she even do it? Those are all these systemic phrases that become so circulated and so such a byproduct, such like this like unconscious comment to anyone that's struggling or has a different child or special needs in any capacity for their offspring. You become told that you are to martyr through this instead of actually actively participating in the choices that you make with how you think about this reality of yours. And I think the harnessing and what I try to constantly call out a lot through my writing is what is actually in front of you, what is controllable, what does cause great peace, great nervous system regulation, um, great awareness, that we have been told, oh, that won't really do much, or I mean, that's nice that you try, but like at the end of the day, that's going to be a little too difficult. And I just always was challenging all those assumptions and presumptions about what can be and what life can look like for families like mine. And so challenging the societal narrative and the societal conditioning of what autistic children can do, what their
Mhm.
possibilities are, and really just celebrating the families from top to bottom. And that does begin and end, generally speaking, with the mothers and caregivers, because that's a primal role. And, I always say my body built these little babies. My body is responsible not only for loving and caring for them, but for supporting them through their development. And so part of it is that radical acceptance that, like, I get to do this. I don't have to do this. I get to do this. And it creates a sense of wonder. It creates a sense of constant presence. And I think acknowledging that on a deeper level reminds you that friction is never to be avoided, it's to work through. And so you get to
Mm.
do this as one of the things I always challenge a lot of parents and other caregivers.
That's wonderful. So, as you have learned to navigate this mindset, what is maybe a piece of advice that you might have for someone who is just maybe receiving an autism diagnosis and first entering this world? How should they go about navigating those resources and figuring out how to support their children, but be also trying to find joy in this diagnosis?
I think it's always, and I take this from another author and writer, Glennon Doyle, who always said just to do the next right thing. It's very
Mm.
easy to get caught up in what the next year is going to look like, or where will they be at 4 or 5 or 6, to compare against their typical peers. It's almost so default that you have to be so conscious about choosing to do the next right thing for the child that you actually have in front of you. Because the truth is, and I tell this to parents all the time, your kiddo is going to develop. Like that's the funny part about this, is that they're not developing. They're developing. It's just in a totally different way, and on a slower, wildly different axis than their typical peers. And so you can't really out self-care your acceptance to that. But if all you can accept at that first chapter post diagnosis, do the next right thing. And if that means for that first week, month, 2 months, is that you just sit and love your child. You go take them for a walk. You do what you can to keep showing up and to put your oxygen mask on first, because your child, regardless of their capabilities in comparison to their typical peers, they're still going to you for what is peaceful and calm, and they look to that. And so I always say that, you will break from the weight of it if you don't just stay where your feet are and do the next right thing.
Yeah, that's I don't know, such a unique perspective and one that I really don't hear because parents are constantly told all the things they should be doing and you need to test for this and you need to enroll in that therapy and you need to do
Why?
it this way. And
It's like
I'm
it's
overwhelmed and that's not even my kid. I'm
so
just your
so that
support
and it
person.
shows that, but that's a great example as to how systemic this is, that how
Yeah.
how how the system is so dysregulated, because it is, listen, profound non-speaking autism is a extremely hard truth to digest, right? It is not easy for anyone in America to hear that I still wipe my almost 11-year-old daughter, right? That's a really uncomfortable thing to hear. Um, and what we do with that information is, as humans have evolved, is that's uncomfortable. So I'm going to remove that from my worldview. I'm going to take that narrative and I'm going to push it off to the side. It can exist, but it can't exist in my reality and what I see and hear every day. And that's what I believe is the hardest, is that those realities aren't shaking off your joy or your ability to be a great mom. It just is challenging what you were so taught to believe, that it has to be a certain way for it to be joyful, for it to be important. And once you kind of radically adapt and accept that, you will end up doing what all the greatest theologians and philosophers and religions of the world do, which is actually be present to where your feet are in the moment. And most incredible gift that children like mine have given me, and I know to others too.
And I think you make a really good point in terms of just not necessarily trying to come at it from a mindset of fixing and being okay
Mhm.
with things being a little uncomfortable. And I
Yes,
think that's where, society really could stand to come in and say, okay, these families can learn how to exist in their little home and their nucleus of life, and that's great. But how can we be the people that are showing up so that these parents aren't trapped in survival mode?
that's
Um,
right.
and it's a skill, I don't feel like. It's not the temptation
Well,
to go toward the child in Walmart who's having a meltdown to help. You wanna look away because it's uncomfortable, right?
yes, and that's a I've spoken to this a lot. There's actually, research done on curiosity and the human brain's desire to find mismatch. We're
Mhm.
wired to notice when things don't look the same, right? If I go outside with my two kiddos and my dog to go for a walk, my son's in a harness because he's an eloper and he's a runner and he's going to dash. And but he deserves to get fresh air every day and he deserves to move his body and he deserves to learn the route that we take to walk the dog, right? Sometimes that mismatch is actually just masked curiosity. People, we can't help but notice, well, that seems a little different. That child looks like he's about 8 years old. Why is he on, a leash? Why is he in a wagon still? Why is she, still attached to her mom via like a wrist leash or something like that? It's so innately human to notice that. And that's why I always challenge other autism moms is to say, don't see it as a negative. We are wired. These people in the stores and at a amusement park or at Disney World or whatever, that looking, that staring, that like, excuse me, oh my gosh, what's happening over there? It's human. It's so human. And the more in which we give grace to humans being humans, just like our children, we're asking for grace, it's symbiotic. It goes both ways.
That's so true, and again, an important message that I don't think people talk about often enough.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious kind of as to, in your experience and as you've gotten to talk with other parents and providers working in this sphere, is there a commonality where everybody's kinda noticing the same disconnect when it comes to the experience of a profoundly autistic family, public's perception of what autism is and what it should look like?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a big old lesson in PR and marketing, right? Like we
Mhm.
went from autism in the 60s and 70s and the 1900s, like to being this like institutionalized, like put the child away under 24/7, like institutional facility level care to putting them back in the homes of their families where they belong without the support. And then we've glamorized through like the 90s and 2000s that it goes from awareness of autism to acceptance. And then we start to glorify and sort of parade the identity of being autistic and not the truth and reality of what I consider profound actual autism. And that's of the media and the PR spin on things and how this world is just a global village when it comes to social media and what gets
Mhm.
attention and what doesn't is likely a lot of times out of our control. So I
Mhm.
know that you know, it's not obviously my number one, but part of my mission is just speaking the truth of what that day to day looks like,
Yeah.
because it's not palpable to many, and it does get very it's very charged because people are so thankful for late diagnosed being autistic or neurodivergent, and it gives them an aha moment about their previous struggles. And I always say that that's the most beautiful part, right? This is so great that we're learning so much as a culture and that there's so much out there and we have this, the internet and social media to like understand people better. If we are considering that the same diagnoses, what's the most profoundly affected of that? We need to move the needle closer to understanding that so that those people get the help and support they need while truly independent individuals who just have a lens of life and are understanding themselves are asked to take a seat and to listen more about the profound
Mhm.
effects of what I believe true autism is.
Yes, and I think that is one of the harder things to navigate online is just because there are a lot of really aggressive we're going to use the phrase high functioning. I know they don't like it, but it's
Yeah.
easier for people to understand. Really aggressive, high functioning autistic folks on the social media sphere that are just attacking these providers and parents who
Yeah,
are not doing anything wrong. They're just
right.
advocating for their reality. And so
But
it is difficult.
unfortunately, the system is limited, and this is where, like,
Yeah.
we don't live in a this earth is made up of multiple different countries and societies and continents, and we live in a country that has limited resources, just like anyone else when it comes to what support looks like. And
Mhm.
I think the challenge is always in saying, if a child is voiceless and I mean, my children would not survive 24 hours without an adult supervision at their ages. We have a major problem within what we were talking about, in terms of what support looks like, because support for my children is actually life and death. Support for a high functioning autistic individual is actually emotional containment. And
Mhm.
I don't say that in a way to downplay how hard it is. As I was a late diagnosed ADHD woman who uses it not as a disorder, but more of a awareness as to how my brain works, so that I can
Mhm.
understand it and make better choices about my life and my routines because of that. And I think that that's where there's always a disconnect, with the more high functioning, low support needs, autistic individuals versus children like mine, who, if it weren't for a mother or caregiver, would not truly have life. And that's a very sobering point. And I know that it hits really hard, but it doesn't mean that the realities and what the cost here, what that cost is to the families like mine. And I sit in a position where I'm so grateful to be able to discuss it. I can pay for respite care. I can afford to discuss therapies and interventions that help. And I am devastated to report that 90% of the families that are in situations like mine are drowning. And it's not
Mhm.
just their financial situation, it's their nervous system is drowning from what is required, to be a caregiver.
Yes, because the support is pretty much non-existent.
Right. And to
Like,
get
I
the
was fortunate enough to work for a family that could pay me privately. I didn't work through the
exactly.
state, and I live
Exactly.
in Texas, and we are way ranked down there in terms of
Yep.
caregivers, and the reason is because on average, caregivers here make around 750 an hour.
And and when you call that out, you can tell a lot by, the group think or the societally conditioned response is like, "Well, what do you expect? Like, your child needs," and you're like, "Yeah."
Mhm,
It's so, if we put such a high cost on human life, which we should be, and as humans, we are, and especially women, again, I say probably ad nauseum, I would love to have the time to go back and get an evolutionary biology degree, because I find the whole primal male, primal female, especially when
mhm.
families are experience a child with a disability, what that does to enact your most primal desires, primal protective natures and structures. And women and mothers and caregivers, we do this naturally. We tend and befriend. That's what women do. We are not the frontline soldiers. We are the ones, loving, caring, supportive, and finding community. And it's so innate. It's innate to women. And to as a society say, yes, you have a child who's going to need your care as if you were a new mother to a newborn, but for the rest of your life, that does something to the nervous system of the caregiver, because it's not wired. We're not wired to care at that level for that long. And so I'm trying to, change the narrative on what that means and why respite, caregivers deserve to be paid very, very well for their service, because it is taxing beyond belief. And if the mothers, and there's, I'm sure you've heard of some of the stories that have come out when tragedies happen around caregiving of profound autism in families like mine, it does something, it does shake awake people to go, oh, they're that was not just the dysregulation of their child, that permeated throughout the entire family. and speaking the truth about that. And this is not, episodic stress. This is 24/7. Um, it deserves to be heard. And I hope that
Yes.
that more people can, and I always encourage other families like mine to share in any capacity, because your
Mhm.
truth is never going, it really does what it says it does. It will set you free. It really will.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's such an important point because I mean, I read a research study, gosh, it's a couple years old now, I think, that have figured out parents of kids with profound disabilities have the exact same nervous system as, like, combat
Yes.
war veterans,
Yeah.
and that's a huge deal. Like, that's 1 in
Like, because
36
right,
families
are
here in the
dealing
United
with that.
States that
Right.
are
Think
operating
about
at
that.
that level.
Yes, and
Yeah.
and that's, I don't know about your algorithm, but my algorithm is full of nervous system, like points these days, right? And like where my GABA receptors are and all my neurotransmitters and all these
Yes.
things. But the more in which we sit into understanding ourselves and our systems, right? They're all connected,
Mhm,
right? So, you can talk to your blue in the face about, gut brain connectivity and neurology and mental disorders and all these different things. At the end of the day, our body is a system of itself, and all those systems do connect. And
mhm,
when that study that was released, it talked about that. It's basically saying that the mother is experiencing a level of hypervigilance, of deep fear of possible pain to be inflicted or possible death, right?
mhm,
And that, when you think of that as a visual, right, that makes sense, because if a man is on active duty and is the front line and is in combat, and his friend gets blown away next to him, there's a reason why PTSD exists, and how we as a country have gotten better on reacclimation to those veterans back into our American society. Yet for mothers that experience that level of nervous system dysregulation or constant hypervigilance or literally constant stress exposure, we give her a pat on the back and say, "You're a really good mom."
mhm. Yeah,
And it
and that's it.
becomes, and that's it. And that's it.
Yeah.
And if we can do it for veterans, we can do it for moms too.
Yes, absolutely. And moms, I mean, they affect the entire family. So when you're looking at a mom who is under that much stress, it's going to impact the other siblings in the home. It's going to
That's
impact the
right.
spouses. It's going to trickle out to society at large. When you've got this huge percentage of families trapped in survival mode, that's
Mhm.
impactful. And I think that's what I'm hoping a lot of people will start to understand who may not be in the autism world. It is a serious issue that is going to impact everyone. It already is, and people need to be more invested in, okay, how do we practically support these families and what does that look like from a
Right.
standpoint of church communities, social communities,
No,
government
I know.
even.
Well,
Yeah.
that, I mean, I challenge all assumptions, right? You
Yeah.
know, what why is that rate going up? Is the child that's getting diagnosed right now actually a child with autism, or do they have oppositional defiance disorder, or do they have ADHD that can be mitigated through a different kind of learning environment? Um, the comorbidities aligned with profound autism um, are life and death, and I think we have to separate the severity in order to center reality to it. And
Mm,
that's where, you know, as much as I can say to any mom, like there are small things you can do every day. You can't self-care your way out of like the systemic insufficiency and inefficacy of the care load that is on you. So
mhm,
the only thing that I do charge any family to do um, with profoundly autistic children is you have to get around and be in a support network of your fellow peers in this. And that doesn't need to be in person. I mean, I'm on a text chain of like 36 other moms of children with profound autism, right? I don't even know half of their first names. It doesn't really matter though, because what we're sharing is, all right, guys, I'm going to Disney World this week. So, Sarah, you were just there. How did the process go with getting the DAS pass or getting through TSA? And there's all these different you end up normalizing through the love of these children that you never expected to have, and that's that community support. And my hope, to your point, is that that doesn't stay just insular, that moves
mm,
outside of just the mothers and caregivers of children with profound disabilities, but actually is seen by other moms who have typically developing children, going, we can help. We can lean
Mhm.
into these things. We can provide respite even as a one-off, as a neighbor, as a friend in a community, just by being aware that families like Sarah's exists.
Yes, and I love that because it's just thinking about practical ways that you can help to whatever your capacity might be.
Yes,
And that's what
yes.
I love to tell people. I'm like, if you're not a caregiver, that's okay, but maybe you have some money and you could say, "Hey, I'll pay for an hour of respite." Or
Or
you're at the grocery store and you call and you say, "Hey, I'm at Walmart. What can I bring you?"
that's
Super
right.
easy. Like similar concept to the community that surrounds moms with newborns, right? How can we
Yes,
figure out a way
exactly.
to
So,
extend
so
that?
I'm so glad you brought this up because I've been wanting to talk about this and I'm glad this is a great segue. So there's a company that has emerged out of Atlanta, I believe, and it's called
Mhm.
Support Now, and it
Okay.
functions similarly like Meal Train, Caring Bridge, uh, what are the other ones? GoFundMe, right? That basically they're saying we're not cashing casseroles, right? There's cashing casseroles for like the newborns or someone unfortunately passes away and you support the family. This can be used in a way to say, "Hi, I'm Sarah. I live in your community. I've got two kids with profound autism. My daughter, uh, this is my schedule. I need someone to help me walk my dog. If you live in this area, would you be willing to help me walk my dog 3 times a week?" And you put
Mhm.
out the needs that you actually need, right? That you actually deeply need, not what someone says, "This is how I can help." You ask specifically, this actually really makes a difference for me. Like, I need my dry cleaning picked up on the other side of town once a month. If you're there, can you mind picking it up for me? It's already prepaid, but if you could drop it off. And it sounds so
That's so
small.
cool.
But what I love
Mhm,
about that is it ties so much with my idea of the Inchstones is that you can be such an ally and such a support to families of with children with profound autism in a way that you think is, well, that's not really helping. Well, that
mm,
seems silly. It's not silly. It's not at all
mhm,
silly. It's actually really deeply it resonates in their hearts of these families. Yet the fear is that, well, that can't be enough. It is.
mm.
It is enough.
And it makes
Mhm.
you feel like you're a part of something bigger, a part
That's
of
right.
a community
That's right.
support. That's huge. But from
Seriously, I wish
something like that,
we could
like,
all have
if
support now. Like everyone should
right?
have all support in our registries because honestly, for the
Yeah.
amount of miles that I'm driving, sometimes I'm, an hour away and I'm in a place where someone's like, "Hey, I really wanted to try out the local meat from the farm." I'm like, "Oh my God, it's the
Mhm.
farm next to the place of the therapy place. I'm happy to grab it for you." But like
Yes.
that's where I think sharing and reality and hope and understanding grows from families like mine who have we have no choice but to live in reality. But if we
Yep.
can bring others in and say, "I honor yours too," I really don't believe in cancel culture. I'm like I
Mhm,
think that we are all flawed and we are trying our best. But man, if
mhm.
we could just lean into saying like, "I'm here, how can I help?" It goes such a far
Yes.
way.
Yes, right?
Right.
And
That's
that light
right.
bulb starts going off. Um,
Yeah.
we were kind of talking prior to hitting record here about like just some systemic flaws that you've
Yeah.
noticed that you've seen when it comes to
Yeah.
support, when it comes to resources. Can you talk a little bit about specifically what those are and why they are so heavily impacting families living with profound autism?
Well, the number one thing goes back to the conversation we just had, which is that
Yeah.
when we look at like all the emerging research and even just like the lived experiences of families like mine and those that are willing to share, what we see is that parents of profoundly autistic children are operating in a constant state of vigilance, right? And it's
Mhm.
like I said, it's not episodic stress. This is chronic and it's unrelenting demand. Truly seeing it requires systemic change and it's going to cost funding and it's require respite systems which that actually work. And that's where I think
Mhm.
the number one systemic flaw is that we have to center the ability to care for these children as the number one systemic change right now. We have to center on how can these children be lovingly cared for without expecting just the family to do it. So we bring in, like you said, highly trained, highly skilled, well paid respite care, facility level care in the home so that the parents can go to work, so that after school there is an aide helping in a ABA fashion, in a DIR floor time fashion, in a holistic child approach to what works for your family. Because truly, I mean, what works for my family of two children with profound autism might not work for the family that you worked for years ago. And that's okay. That's like anyone else. I do Bikram yoga. You're like, I'm a runner. I'm like, give me I can't run to save my life, but it's still exercise and it's still grounding and it's still helpful. And so we have to take that same mindset of it's not going to look the same for every family, but they're still deserving of that kind of respite care and what they need.
Mhm.
And that our individual desires as a family unit should still be achievable in this country, given that we do value life and we value that every human teaches us something, is a component to society, and is a deep component to families and life going on. And I think that to answer your question, like the number one systemic flaw is around respite care. And it's
Mhm.
around being able to have that provided and not having, because right now, I mean, people can get it in New Jersey. I mean, you can
Yeah.
attain respite, and it probably is a decent number of hours to obtain that. That's the irony. It takes so much for these parents to
Mhm.
even apply for it that it becomes like a double-edged sword of like, well, why would I don't even know if I'm going to get it. How would I waste the time even applying for it? Like that's a flaw. That's a major flaw. It should go alongside. We have a great early intervention process here in New Jersey where you're given a case manager and a team and the evaluators, and it's so well structured. I believe that a respite care and counselor for the family should be a part of that system too.
That would be amazing.
You know?
Yeah. Yes. And so from your perspective, is this a change that you feel needs to come from like the bottom up, like a grassroots style, or from the top down, more like federal changes?
Gosh, it's a really great question. I'm not sure I have the answer to that. I think right now both
Yeah.
are happening. I
Mhm.
think that the exposure of fraud in this country around how little is being supervised and monitored within
Mhm.
the autism, Medicaid portal, and the actual money that is like completely undocumented and wasteful, needs to start at a federal level. And then I think that
Mhm.
it really will become tribes of mothers, that I'm trying to lead and develop in other parts of the country to challenge that narrative on a local level. I think it'll be both. And I think that from the top, it's going to come from very big voices, very big leaders at, Profound Autism Alliance and the National Council on Severe Autism, people that have funding behind them to go to DC and make some bold moves. And at the end of the day, like anything else, movements start in your communities, and they start within the homes and when people are struggling and finally say enough. So that gap, I hope will actually be from both ends.
Yeah, that would be amazing, and I feel like we would get to move a lot faster, if we were
Yeah.
coming at it from both the grassroots
Yes.
and a federal level. So it's been encouraging for me at least to see people starting to get a little more bold, and I don't wanna use the word aggressive, but yeah, there's been some bold moves, pertaining to
Yeah.
the needs behind these
I
families, which
think
is
that I think it
exciting.
really does come down to the number of families being willing to say, here's the reality.
Yeah.
If I don't have a lock on my triple lock on my front door, my son will be at the pond and he will be dead because they're
Mhm.
drawn to water. And the number one cause of death for profoundly autistic children under the age of 14 is drowning. So we need
Yes.
to sit in that, what I like to call it, the hot loneliness. It's very
Mhm.
uncomfortable, but when we sit in those numbers and we sit about what that means. So this is a family of, children that, for all intents and purposes, if my kids were being raised in the 80s and they were all typical,
Mhm.
they're latchkey kids, man. They're letting themselves in, they're getting snacks. They're
Yeah.
they're starting their show. They're biking to their soccer game down the street, right? These are, for all intents and purposes, should be kids that are somewhat self-sufficient. Yet I live in a home where I triple lock my doors, have locks on every cabinet, have to lock and create such a padded environment with, I mean, there can't be glass out in the kitchen because my son will likely climb on the stove and he's going to knock something over. I mean, it's not, it's not easy to hear. It's not a parenting problem. It is a disorder. And when that disorder is so reliant on another human keeping someone alive, we have to center that. We have to.
Mhm.
And I always say, like, I've my partner has friends that are Navy SEALs, and I joke, I'm like, y'all, you get to go home after a 6-month deployment.
Mhm.
This is what constant vigilance and nervous system dysregulation happens when, I mean, I have a, again, wonderful support system set up. Realistically, I have maybe an ability to take a week off a year if I'm really getting
Wow.
serious, 1 week. Now, I know that some moms don't get anything. Typical moms would say, well, I mean, I barely get off, I can barely take a Saturday. Yes. And by the time your children are 18, they're going to be living independently. So
Mhm.
there's trade-offs to all of this. But we just need to get really radically comfortable with being uncomfortable about the realities of
Mhm.
profoundly autistic children.
Yes, and comfortable with the word disorder. Every time people hear that when it comes to autism,
Uh,
they go, "Ee, it's not a disorder." I'm like, "It's
that is
literally in the name." I'm
literally
sorry.
disorder. There's a,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a, if we are trying to get children to um, in, trying to get neurodiverse autistic children to become functioning members of society,
Mhm.
we are saying that how they're acting is disordered, correct? They are not seeing, experiencing life in a way that we can order them around development like their peers, period. We have to be okay with the emotional pushback from high functioning autistics to remind them that you're living independently, being able to say this. That's phenomenal. I'm so thankful that you can share about how hard this is and how much, this affects your day to day. You're living independently.
Mhm.
That is not the reality. My children will be living with me for the rest of my life. And that is a different resonant fear and a different resonant reality and truth that is likely why um, those, at ASEN and other organizations get very angry about the caregiver narrative of
Mhm.
families like mine. Because what is it? You don't speak for us without us, not us without us. I forget what their tagline is, but I always say it has to, like, and it should be saying, and with children who are with a caregiver for the rest of their lives as well.
Yes, I had the opportunity to speak with a rep at the ASA, and I asked them about that specifically,
Yeah,
um, just because they were throwing me all these research articles about how autistics don't want causation research, and we don't want, parents to be involved, and they were giving me all this information, and I finally asked them, I'm like, "Where are you getting these statistics? Like, how is this research being done?" And they said, "Oh, it's being done through emailed surveys to our autistic community groups." And I said, "Okay, so A, the people that you can send these to are able to have an email account and they can read the
correct.
survey.
Exactly. Mhm.
B, they have the communication between the brain and the body to be able to fill out a survey so
That's
they
right.
can use their fine motor skills.
Right.
And C, they're able to talk to you about their opinions on the survey. So how are you collecting data from the other 50% on the spectrum who are not able to do those things?"
Right.
And crickets. And these are the leading voices for autism
Right.
advocacy. And that's where the frustration for me comes in a little bit because I'm like, man, you guys don't realize the power that you have right now. The
Yes.
United States is looking to you to determine how we view autism as people on the outside looking in.
You know, if you really if you really boil it down, it becomes to this autism in different languages is like within one's own inner world, right? It's like a
Mhm.
very self-centric narrative.
Yes.
Fortunately, and this hits a hot button, but like high functioning low support needs autism is actually very ego-centered.
Mhm.
It's lacking deep empathy for the other, and
Mhm.
the collision of those lived realities, people in the autism community are coming from a place of autonomy and identity. So they're protecting like dignity, rights, and like a history where disabled people were mistreated or erased. That matters, but it matters
Yes.
more to those that won't move anything forward. Medical complexities and dependence, when you sit on the spectrum and don't have that, and you're being told to sit down and listen, that's a challenge to what they're basically saying. And so that's why it becomes this fight is that you're telling them, I hear you, you're going to need to take in another narrative. that's wildly difficult for
Mhm.
people with high functioning autism because
Mhm.
it's an identity and it's become so dominant to the narrative that, in my mind, that's why it's still a disorder. Is that if we allow that to dominate the narrative around autism, it doesn't reflect the full range of actual needs at
Yes.
all.
Yeah. Very identity centered language, which
Mm,
adds in a whole nother complexity factor, right? Because just that
it
word,
does.
identity politics, makes people go, ah. So it's challenging.
It's charged,
Um,
it's complex,
yeah.
and we're here for it.
That's why I do your own research. Read some, I don't know, podcasts, read your Substacks. There's so many incredible
But I think,
resources out there.
what happens though in general, and this happens not in just the autism community, but in any kind of um, subject that has
Mhm.
two varying opinions, is that look to the people that can digest and sit with both. If you're only able
Mhm.
to sit with yours, you got to get really quiet about where you're grounded in. If you're only grounded on your side, generally speaking, that that shows lack of awareness, lack of desire to learn, lack of empathy, and when pushed and shoved, ironically, the disorder then presents itself even more because of that. So,
Yeah.
uh, if you flatten everything into one identity, people with the highest needs are going to disappear. And that's why I know mothers like myself and a number of others on a national scale are just saying, absolutely not, absolutely not sit
Mhm.
down.
From a, like, practical perspective, do you feel that it would be beneficial for there to be a separate diagnostic category for profound autism?
I've
Like,
written about
I
this.
guess
I've written about this and I've talked about this a lot,
yeah.
only from a sense of funding.
Okay.
I say that because there's already sort of movement in that direction. Like even the term profound autism is being used more intentionally in research and clinical conversations. And,
Mhm.
Princeton did the big study where they were talking about like broadly affected autism, like which would be children like mine versus, minimally affected or specifically affected. The question isn't should the diagnosis exist? It's like, how does it exist and what would actually change if it was divided? So, do I believe that it is all still one spectrum? Yes. The division would be for the realities of it, not that the actual spectrum should be divided, if that makes
That
sense.
makes sense because 'cause you're
Um,
still seeing some commonalities in, like, how they process the world and brain chemistry
exactly,
and all.
exactly.
It's
Yes.
the
And I
comorbidities that are coming in
correct.
that make it more
I was
challenging.
hosting my favorite, I call my dadvocate, my favorite autism dad, Tyler Hudson, and
Oh, yeah,
he.
we just had a conversation last
You
week.
did?
He's
Oh,
awesome.
you did. Okay,
Yeah,
so he's
yeah,
my favorite.
yeah.
So we were
He's
just speaking,
amazing.
and I don't know if he gave the example of this, and I give him all the credit for this, is that if you think of autism as an electric fence, right? And
Mhm,
there's a height to fences and there's voltage on it. Autism is an electrical fence, but there's
mhm,
comorbidities and there's different wires and twines and sparks and outlets and things that are going to react to that fence when hit that are going to elevate the response of the body to all those comorbidities and autism. So it's all realistically dividing it is only because of the semantics and the need for structural support under those
mhm,
higher needs. It's
mhm.
not to actually separate the disorder. I do believe it actually is the spectrum of that is a disorder with a vast number of comorbidities along, epilepsy, apraxia, dyspraxia, dyslexia, all the different things.
Yeah, that's a really helpful mental image, I think,
Oh,
and
totally.
yeah. Would also be curious too as to, do you think it would be helpful for families kind of coming into this diagnosis for there to be a little more of a clear course of action when it comes to, like, holistic medical support? Because I know a lot of parents kind of receive the diagnosis and then it's a, oh, good luck to you.
Mhm.
Would it make a difference from a practical standpoint for families to immediately be given access to things like if they want to get gut tested, if they want to check for,
Yeah.
seizure conditions, that kind of thing, from a medical standard of care?
Yes, absolutely. I was speaking at a conference a few weeks ago, and I had a woman stand up and said, "What she specifically asked me like what I think about chiropractic care for her child with profound autism." And I said, "Here's the thing: if you I believe that we as women and mothers that have these babies with autism spectrum disorder, there is not a single other mother and caregiver that can say with confidence what is right for your child. And I believe that the maternal instinct is scientific data. I think it is baked into us. I think it is so deeply misunderstood as a scientific data point for our children that this holistic approach going forth from a deep inner knowing that you can't pinpoint, but you just know that maybe this might be something that it helps me understand my child more, not to fix, not to, like eradicate the way in which your child's, personality is, but just as a way to say, oh, this is helping my child literally physically live and be where their feet are. There's nothing that's off the table for me. I didn't go to chiropractic care for my children, but if that's something that a mother thinks that might be helpful for their child's, fine and gross motor skills or their gut brain, connective balance, absolutely. I
Mhm.
think the more that we deny our internal knowing and the maternal instinct, the farther away we are going to get from actually helping our children become the best versions of who they are. And
Mhm.
that, without a doubt, needs to be told to women and mothers and caregivers when diagnoses are received, because I think that can create a greater sense of peace when you're flailing for answers, scared for the future, to know you actually are going to be able to do this and you are the one that knows your child best. That's been somehow skewed in the last 100
Mhm.
years in this country, that maternal instinct is just fluff or erratic or chaotic.
Mhm.
When logically described and critically dictated, can actually be one of the most highly directive, positive things for any child. And I've seen it firsthand with my own kids.
Yes, and that, fighting for them to achieve the best possible quality of life. I think people misinterpret that into thinking that these parents are somehow like in denial or they're trying to
Putting our tin
cure
hat
their kid of
on. Yeah,
autism.
yeah,
Like, I don't
yeah.
think you understand. They want their child to not be in pain. Like they want them to be regulated. Like you
Yes,
said, they want them to be where their feet are, right? And
yes,
able to
yes.
interact with the world. And that's huge. And so reframing it to where instead of shaming parents for asking these questions, we're
Yep,
encouraging that. We're encouraging that instinct to be like, yeah, you do what you feel is gonna be best for your child and is gonna help them thrive. It's huge.
definitely.
Yeah. Well, I'll kinda close this out with this because I like to do this at the end.
I,
From your experience and in lived experience, all the stories that you have heard, if you were to sit across the table from somebody who wants to get involved in supporting autism families or in autism advocacy, where would you tell them to start?
hmm. Oh gosh. Um, I do believe the easiest way, given the state of our world, is to search on social media, whatever platform that you like to take in, whether that's Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or any sort of online support group. If you can go to directly to the pages of what the parents are speaking about, even Reddit threads, and try to seek out understanding of those pain points, not as a way to um, not as a way to feel afraid of what you're getting yourself into, but as a way to understand what's actually needed by allies and support. I think that doing that on a community level, I know as someone who's been a recipient of help like that, again, goes such a long way. I think trying to understand what that reality looks like, and there are families like mine that are sharing the truth about and the highs and the lows. Not, don't get me wrong, there's it's hard to share the lows and it's easy to share the highs, but we don't want our children to be puppets on display just for the entertainment and saying, oh, well, look what these kids with autism can do. I think if you can find ways in your community, that then there definitely are. I mean, I know in my local town, even there's committees for the school district that are put together of the parents and caregivers. So asking to join that, going to sit in on a meeting of what that looks like and hear and witness and simply, yeah, take in, stand vigil to what is being discussed, and then proactively take the next step and simply saying to whatever the leader of that community is how can I best help? Here's what I know I can do really well. And
Mm.
I think I'm just so thankful for anyone that does choose to lean in like that, because that's a very selfless act of service to your other, other women and mothers. And no one would turn that away.
Wonderful. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and for sharing all of this. I had so much fun.
And too, thank you for what you're doing and what you're
Yeah.
doing to change the narrative and also just host these conversations from the point of your perspective, being a caregiver as well, but also um, again, you're hosting a platform for us to share and to speak the truth. And I think it's really powerful. The more that people can get their eyes on your work, the better.
Thank you. It's my highest honor. I love it.
Awesome. Thanks, Chloe.
Absolutely.